what my grandkids wrote. We sat next to each other 5-6 days a week ever since him and Simone moved down here permanently. I always sat on the right side of Bob. And a lot of people that are here today seen that. And that was 12 years at least that happened. Quite often Bob and I would go to a restaurant and people would go with us. In the conversations, he would always have a sympathetic ear, but then he would throw in a piece of Bob wisdom. On any topic, any issue. And for me, it was usually stop your whining and get on with it. It never failed to make me and anyone else at the table, like it did here today, laugh. And it always made me stop and think. I'm going to miss you, Bob. So my job here this afternoon in leading this service is to introduce each member of Bob's family, or the members of Bob's family, who want you to know him the way they knew him. And first, I'm going to introduce Jesse.
Good afternoon. I have requested and been given the honor of eulogizing my father today. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to reduce a man's life that has been 90 years in the making into a few sentences. It is impossible to properly share with you a complete picture of a great man that we all knew and loved in such a short time. Instead, I've tried to construct a true picture of a man that struggled through life and made mistakes, just like all of us, but also someone who overcame almost every obstacle, leaving us with an example we can follow in our own lives. Robert Earl Clutts was born on September 29, 1930, exactly 1 month before the day of the stock market crash that would be the beginning of the Great Depression. We don't really know what impact that had on a poor farming family in the middle of Arkansas, or if it had anything to do with his mother leaving when he was still a young boy, or the decision for him to be raised by his grandparents on their farm. We do know that life on the farm was hard. As I got into beekeeping in Alaska, Dad told me that his grandfather always kept a few beehives because sugar was a luxury they never had on the farm. He told me of picking fruit in the fall and packing it in straw down in a root cellar, and it being just as fresh as the day it was picked in the middle of winter. Dad would learn to work hard even as a boy, doing whatever he could, which would include picking cotton for just pennies per bushel. Serving in the Army must have looked pretty exciting to Dad as World War II was coming to an end. He probably saw young men not much older than himself coming home to a hero's welcome. Never being one to let government regulations stand in his way, Dad decided if he wanted to be 17 years old so he could enlist in the Army, then it didn't matter that he was only 16. According to the United States Army, Dad was born on September 29, 1929. Basic training would have been no problem for Dad, and by the time he got to his first duty station in Panama, he was confident that he had made the right decision. But later, as a combat medic, valiantly struggling to save the lives of fellow soldiers on the frozen battlefields of Korea, there would be times when he doubted the decisions that had brought him there. Times like the one that earned him the Purple Heart for being wounded in combat. The Army would eventually transfer Dad to the United States territory of Alaska, where he felt at home among the places and people that were just as rough, just as raw, tough, and mysterious as he was. His free time would be spent in the popular Alaskan activities of hunting, fishing, drinking, and fighting. Yes, Dad would find temporary relief from the nightmarish scenes of war, the rejection of his parents, and his feelings of insecurity and inadequacy by drowning them in a bottle. It was a practice that would contribute to not only his discharge from the Army, but the failure of his first marriage. But not before he was blessed with his beautiful daughter, Linda. Linda isn't able to travel to be with us today, but there is no doubt about the bond between her and her father. I don't know what Linda said to Dad that day in the hospital as Jennifer held the phone up to his ear. But it was only minutes later that he peacefully passed away, as if he'd just been waiting to hear from her. After his discharge from the Army, Dad worked several different jobs, including a bartender, cab driver, and clearing seismic trails for the oil companies. He eventually ended up working as a bartender for a woman named Julie Egbert, who owned the Anchor River Inn on one of his favorite fishing streams. Bob and Julie eventually married, and Dad became the driving force behind decades-long growth of the business. Joining the Army at the age of 16, after growing up on a farm, you can imagine that Dad was lacking in formal education. He would eventually receive a general education degree while he was in the Army, but he was always embarrassed by his lack of formal education, even though he was clever, street smart, good with numbers, and well-read. Very few college-educated men could match wits with him. However, when it came to the Anchor River Inn, he mostly ran that business by a sheer force of will and commanding presence that somehow made square pegs fit into round holes. He was a respected man in all of Alaska, and was often asked to serve on boards and commissions. Governors and community leaders came to him for counsel. Congressman Don Young, now the longest-serving congressman in history, loved to tell me the story of coming to visit Dad before a public meeting at the nearby elementary school. They'd been swapping stories and smoking cigars, and the good congressman headed over to the meeting at the tobacco-free school zone with a pocket full of Dad's cigars sticking out of his breast pocket. Most of Dad's success came after he stopped drinking. With the help of a 12-step recovery program, Dad not only celebrated 39 years of sobriety, but he was able to share that message of hope and provide a new life to countless others. People loved him for his straightforward, no-nonsense approach to recovery. Of all of Dad's strengths before he met my mom, I think the strongest was the wall that he had built around his heart. Abandoned by his mother, divorced from the wife of his youth, struggles with alcoholism, and finally the death of Julie after a difficult marriage. It was a miracle that all the broken pieces of Dad's life and all of the broken pieces of Mom's life seemed to fit together so perfectly. Mom was living in a small cabin with just me and my brother John when they met. I was a well-mannered, bright 12-year-old. And my brother was a troubled, juvenile, delinquent 15-year-old. Mom and Dad would joke in later years that he only married her for us boys. And it wasn't long after they were married that a very nervous Bob sat at the dining room table with Mom seated beside him for moral support. And he asked us if he could be our dad and if we would take his name. But we always knew, as much as he ever loved us, nothing could ever compare to the love that they had for each other. It didn't come all at once, though. Soon after they started dating, Mom, no stranger to being in a relationship with people who couldn't show their affection, was going to end their relationship because she couldn't see past that wall that Dad had built. However, one day, in a quiet moment alone, she heard a voice that spoke to her very soul, saying, "This is the man that I have chosen for you." With a little bit of effort from all of us, we began to see those walls come tumbling down until they were nothing but dust. And that tough old man became a loving father and a husband. I dreamed that I would one day be able to experience a love like the love that is shared between my mom and Dad. And thanks in a large part to my father's example, I have. I was worried about Dad when they decided to move down here to Florida. He had such a routine that he followed in Alaska, you could almost set your watch by him. And he had so many friends there. I didn't need to worry, though, did I? All of you embraced him and made him a part of your family, and you gave him years of life that he never would have had. He loved you as much as he ever loved those friends in Alaska, or all over the country for that matter, since Dad never did meet a stranger. But it was with the wonderful people here in Florida that he chose to spend the last few years of his life. I'm so very grateful for the opportunity that we had to move down here to Florida and spend these final months with Dad and to be with Mom at this difficult time. Last month for Valentine's Day, Jennifer and I wanted to celebrate with Mom and Dad. So even though Dad had been eating all of his meals in his recliner for several months, we asked if he would be willing to have a nice dinner at the table. And since Jennifer was the one asking, he readily agreed. We fixed a nice lamb dinner and enjoyed a fantastic meal with romantic music playing softly in the background. We talked about days gone by and those yet to come. It was probably the memories of that night spent together and the fact that Mom had once again fixed lamb that inspired Dad to want to eat at the table again on that night about a month later. Only this time he fell and bumped his head before he got to the table. Everything appeared to be fine. But 2 days later, after telling Mom goodnight and that he loved her, he slipped into unconsciousness and would not awaken again. It was a peaceful end to a remarkable life. And now we carry the burden of taking all the lessons that he taught and all the love that he shared to keep his legacy alive. Thank you.
Now Bob's son John will share his memories of his father.
First of all, Jess, thanks. That was beautiful. I too would like to welcome friends, family. No, thank you for coming. Very much appreciative. Sorry, give me a second. Yes, Dad, I know. We're in a church, all right? I know. No, Dad, that's silly. I'm not going to say it. Okay. I'll tell him. Dad wants all of you to know he's spoken to the other old guy. And that everybody is safe in this church. It's not going to burst into flames. Nobody's going to get hit by lightning. We're all safe today. Memories of Dad. Where does a son begin? I remember when I was about 14 years old. As Jesse alluded to earlier, Dad came up to pick up Mom for a date. First time we really even met Dad. At that time, it was Bob. Before he took her away on their date, he asked myself and my brother if we needed anything. I sternly looked at this older gentleman in my 14 years of youth and told him to have my mom home by 10 o'clock. And he did. From that day on, though, Dad started being the man he didn't have to be. He was much more than a father. He was a dad. He took so much more in than just marrying my mother. As Jesse also tried to allude to earlier, he took on one bratty child. On the 7th of April, 35 years ago, he married my mother. He didn't marry my mother, he married us. And he made our family whole. Again, he became the dad he didn't have to become. One day about a year ago, after Dad's health started to decline or worsen, I was driving to work, and I heard a song on the radio that I heard before, but at this time it was the perfect time. And it touched me. I had a hard time driving the rest of the way to work. Now I have 3 boys of my own, and I hope to be half the father he was. If you please watch the screen and listen, this song tells a story way better than I can.
Bob's daughter, Linda, wasn't able to travel to be here today. So she has asked Nancy, her great friend Nancy Matthews, to share. Where's Nancy? Oh, there she is. Can you just pull it down?
I think maybe a little lower. That's great. Hi. It's a real honor to be asked to be part of this ceremony today. Linda's a good friend, and I'm sorry she couldn't be here. This is for Linda. It is with incredible sadness that I am delivering this farewell to my father in this way. For all of you who are there, thank you for the love and support you had for my dad and the rest of my family in Florida. But most of all, the family you became to me when I was there. I love you all. I say farewell to a man that to me was much more than a father. My father was a man of few words and many smirks. There were times when I would amuse him greatly. He was also a man with so many pearls of wisdom, like, it's in the book. Are you working with others? This too shall pass. Are you going to meetings? But most of all, his parting words the last time I was in Florida, do we have any unfinished business? I'm forever grateful that for that question I could and can firmly answer no. He was also a great teacher. The lessons have been many, i.e., loving cigar smoke, fishing, bartending, working hard, starting over, and most of all, showing me being sober was possible. It is heartbreaking to know that I have received the last chip he will be able to pass to me, a gift from him for many years. In turn, I taught him patience and tolerance. Like when I called in tears for him to bring me gas at 3 a.m. in a blinding snowstorm while on a quest to help someone in need, third time that year, reminding me again in his gentle way that I'm sure was heard for miles, that it was just as easy to keep the top half of the bleeping gas tank full. Or the time as a teen I said I was going fishing at night, and he informed the hungover me the next morning, fish don't bite at night. Nothing else needed to be said. Then there were times I'd have a political opinion that didn't match his. Okay, I loved getting him fired up, and that was a surefire way to do it. So I'm blessed to have been able to speak to Dad, to say a final so long, and that it was time for him to go be with his granddaughter and my daughter Kimmy, who passed in 2006. Not 10 minutes later, I got the text that he was on the other side. This is what I believe to be true. God looked around his garden and found an empty place. He then looked down upon the earth and saw your tired face. He put his arms around you and lifted you to rest. God's garden must be beautiful. He always takes the best. He knew that you were suffering. He knew you were in pain. He knew that you would never get well on earth again. He saw the road was getting rough and the hills were hard to climb. So he closed your weary eyelids and whispered, "Peace be thine." It broke my heart to lose you, but you didn't go alone, for part of me went with you the day God called you home. Love you, Dad. Thank you.
Bob's son, Jack, is now going to share his memories.
I have never met Bob before he married my mom and adopted my brother, John and Jesse. Before him, I was always worried about my family in Alaska and how they could survive on their own. I lived with my father, who was paraplegic for 57 years. We were very close, and I wanted my little brothers to have a father that they could be close with, too. It made me feel guilty, like I wasn't being a good brother for them. Mom was surviving in the wild of Alaska, alone with her 2 young boys, just like in an old Western movies. Then I saw this picture of Bob, and I felt like a real-life cowboy has shown up in their life that wouldn't take good care of my mom, being a father for my brothers. They would finally have a dad and be able to feel for him like I did for my dad. I am so grateful to him for taking good care of my brother, and especially my mom. I wanted to thank him for taking better care of them than I could have ever imagined. He sacrificed his life for them. He did such a good job of providing an example for his entire family and all of his friends. Mom has come a long way from the time when she was alone supporting the boys, and I am so glad that he married my mom and gave his life to her and the boys. I am so very relieved that my brother had a special relationship with their father like I have with mine. I can't thank him enough. I love you, Bob. He's a real cowboy. Thank you to all of our dads.
Now, so that we can hear from Bob's friends and family, Lori's going to tell us some of the stories that have been sent and told to her. Excuse me, that's Lori Myers.
Well, hi there, everyone. I've been asked to bring back some lightness to this ceremony because, as you know, this is a celebration of Bob and Bob's life. And can't you just picture him now going, sure, get the dumb blonde up there. Everyone will just laugh at you just standing there. And I can picture him looking down at me. The family had sought some submissions from, friends, so that I could share some of them here, but also put them together into a book so that the family can peruse them at their leisure later. And I have to admit, I didn't get as many responses as I had hoped, but then I had to consider your own reactions to the request. I mean, when they asked me to share, I was just like, what the heck can I share that Bob has shared with me with a memory that can be repeated here in church, right? You never knew what you were going to get with that man and what would escape his lips. Such was our interactions with Bob. The first time Bob was to have dinner with my children and I warned my kids. And I told them that Bob may have some very offensive things to say. And I said, just try to ignore it. He's from a different generation. Have patience. That afternoon, we sat down with a bunch of friends, and sure enough, I look over, Bob's talking to my kids. And all of a sudden, bloop, out it comes, something that shouldn't be repeated here, and it won't be repeated here. And all I saw was my kids sit up straight, and they turn and look at me with these wide eyes, and I just chuckled. Classic Bob. Classic Bob. Hey. Hey. Of all the memories that were shared with me, this always comes up, right? Everyone knew Bob with his cigar. It was never missing. Dave Schwartz shared with us the only time Bob was without a cigar in his maw was during a meeting, or so I tell myself. I know about guys who smoke cigars. They have an attitude and demeanor unto themselves. My father was a World War II vet and a cigar guy. And did Bob not have a demeanor and character all to himself? Yes, it's true. Bob always had a cigar with him. Hi. Huh. I think he was saying howdy to me. But even John, Jesse's son, and Bob's grandson, offered to do translation and to have closed captioning behind me if I insisted on continuing to speak with the cigar in my mouth. Jesse also shared a story with me about how when he was younger, Bob would take him and the family out for ice cream cones at McDonald's. And Bob would take them through the drive-thru. 4 cones. Inevitably, they would get to the windows and 4 Cokes would be up there. Bob would get ornery and said, I said 4 ice cream cones. Yes, memories of Bob and his ever-present cigar are truly the most often repeated. 1 year ago, well, it was actually longer than a year ago, but 1 year my boss went to Cuba, and he brought me back a cigar from Cuba, and this was before it was open for travel, so it was smuggled in, and it was a real McCoy. And all I could think of was Bob. I knew that man would love this cigar. So I held on to it until I knew that we'd be at a gathering of friends and that we would be at a special event. And so when I gave him the cigar, he just went, thanks. All gruffly, you know? But I saw the twinkle in his eye. And Simone later told me that he showed that cigar to everyone that night and told them all that it was from Cuba. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his message packed a powerful punch. James McGonigal shared with me, he could right-size me in the shortest sentence possible. We all know Bob. He always made me feel special with the most sarcastic, lovable words. The greatest generation, what can I say? And I know those of you that do know Bob, you have been right-sized by him many a times. And you can understand James's comments. Bob did, as Jesse mentioned, Bob wasn't educated, but he did appear to have a degree in sarcasm. And he earned high marks in that course, too. Sharon Keaton shared, every time he spoke in my presence, it was with profound wisdom and, of course, quick wit. A wonderful human being. Quick wit is an understatement, Sharon. Sometimes it would be hours later before I could comprehend the true meanings of his words, right? Brandy Callahan shares with us, last spring I was at a meeting telling the gang about a bird I had seen in my backyard that morning. Bob pipes up and says, he's a bird watcher. I said, oh yeah, Bob? What's your favorite kind of bird? Bob went on to say, a red-headed, double-breasted mattress thrasher. It was priceless. And in case, for those of you that it did go too fast, let me repeat. Bob said, a red-headed, double-breasted mattress thrasher. Oh, yes. That would be reference to his lovely bride, the red-headed Simone. Oh, Bob. Yes, Bob loved Simone. He was such a flirt, too. When I first met them, they would sit across from each other at a meeting of like-minded folks. I would sit next to Simone, and all during that meeting, I would be subjected to Bob sitting across from us, winking at her, making googly eyes, and Simone would be sitting there back, like all blushing like a little schoolgirl. They made me blush some of those nights. And although I was a tad jealous, let's pay tribute. They had such a beautiful love affair. They just shared a wonderful life. But for all Bob's tough man bravado, Bob had the softest heart. He was the most kindest man. And these are the memories that most wanted to share with me for today. It was obvious that many wished to share what a gentle man and what a gentle soul he had. Maybe it was because it contradicted the hard demeanor he tried to portray with his crass, sarcastic comments. A man of few words for sure, but darn if his actions didn't portray that softy of a heart. Julie Swisher wrote, I worked for Bob at the Anchor River Inn just after high school in 1984. My favorite memory of him was a few years later when we were sitting at the community coffee table with our then 4-year-old daughter, and they were out of marshmallows for her hot chocolate. Bob wouldn't have it. So he went out and got some marshmallows and came back with them. He put lots of them in her mug. He was forever more lovingly called the Marshmallow Man by our daughter. And Deanna Chesser wrote, to me, Bob was Anchor Point. Without him, I'm not sure if Anchor Point would have existed. He was a permanent fixture. We made fun of him at the annual variety show. And let me just interject. If I would have saw him on that rocking horse, I would have made him ride it for the variety show. All right, back to Deanna's. He had a great sense of humor about it. He and his cigar were ever present in some form. If we were eating at the Anchor River Inn, he was sure to stop by our table and everyone else's. He would ask about my folks, if the food was good, and tease us about something. I'm sorry for his passing. Anchor Point and the Anchor River Inn will never be the same. But I'm sure the memory of him, as well as his ever-present cigar, lit or not, will linger in this community for years to come. And here's one from Michael Barron. This man I have known since I was 10. He always called me Charlie. I think because I had a boy's name. He made his own to fit me as a result. When I started to work for the family who I adopted, and Bob became Dad, his nickname, his gruff voice would yell, and I can so picture this, Charlie! I always thought I was in trouble, but I figured out that he was just a big teddy bear, except the one time. So it was the night before April Fool's. I set the bar up with pranks for the bartender. I thought I was so crafty, so I taped straws and napkins together, put a rockfish that was on the wall in the ice bin and covered it with lots of ice. I did lots of other things too. But Dad, I forgot, came in early before the rest of the staff to make a Virgin Bloody Mary. I got called at some ugly hour, Charlie! And I can't repeat what was said right after. What did you do to the bar? Ha, 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 it was classic. Straws and napkins everywhere and a fish staring at him from the ice bin. Boy, was I in trouble. He grumbled for days after, but he was always there for me. There were times I couldn't get out of my driveway for work in the morning. I called and he was there. And so many other things he did for me and others from his heart. He might have grumbled, cigar and all, but he would always help those who deserved it. I'm very proud to call him Dad, and I love Simone and the rest of the family as my own adopted. I loved working for them. And then I have a special one from Dave Schwartz, a local. Schwartzy. God, how can he smoke these? I just don't understand it. And I've done a lot of things. Schwartzy, he called me. In Schwartzy I remained. I was freshly sober when I met Bob. He and Simone were traveling members of the first group I called home. My sponsor loved and respected these Alaskans, and he told me I should listen to what they had to say. I needed a crusty, independent Alaskan warrior in early sobriety. If he could stay sober, so could I. Bob had a wife who loved him and a quiet recovery, both of which were beyond me. Bob was a man with solid, real recovery, a man who shared his time and experience when asked. And you could ask him dear near anything and not get much BS back. He might sometimes look at you like you had two heads. A look I experienced more than once. Me too. And he damn sure wouldn't suffer fools. But if you asked, he'd give it to you straight, devoid of political correctness. Eventually, Bob and Simone settled down here, and they became regular members of my home group on the north end of Anna Maria. They introduced me to their friends Patty and Gay, and collectively they taught me and anyone else who would listen about their program of recovery and service. They showed me what was important, and I was grateful for the showing. My honeymoon trip was a cruise to Alaska, and one of our stops was in Homer, their old hometown. Simone and Bob gave us contacts, and one of their home group members picked us up and took us to their old meeting in Homer. In 2016, we again sailed for Alaska, and our ship again stopped in Homer, but this time it was Bob there. He picked us up from the ship and showed us his domain. We drove from Homer to his and Simone's former home and business, the Anchor River Inn. It was glorious and magical, that sunny, warm mid-July day. After meeting the grandkids and feeding us, and after exchanging off-colored jokes with my very southern wife, something which just delighted him, as he adored real women, he drove us down the river road to the beach, where we gazed at the larger-than-life mountain range across the Cook Inlet and wondered at the evidence of a tide beyond our experience. He then took us to a meeting and got us back to our ship. Hugs and goodbyes and memories. Quite a place, Alaska. Quite a guy, Bob. And yes, Dave, thank you for that. Bob was quite a guy indeed. And now I have my favorite softie moment. It happened on April 26, 2018. Simone was in Arizona with her son, Jesse. She could not attend her home group meeting, and it was their monthly anniversary meeting where they'd have a speaker, and Bob was scheduled to be the speaker that evening. Well, since Simone couldn't be there, and Bob was going to be the speaker, and I think it was her 51st anniversary it would have been, I told her I'd gather up some ladies, and we'd go out and show Bob some support and surprise him. Bob was definitely surprised when about 8 of us walked through the door. Of course, he acted like he didn't care, but his eyes betrayed him each and every time. At the appropriate moment, Bob got up to share, and he started his share. But all of a sudden, he just paused. He looked at me, and then he looked out into the audience again. And he said, in case you don't know it, Simone and I adopted Lori as one of our own. Her and her children are our Florida family. There was absolutely no reason for Bob to include that in his share. You know that. And I almost started to cry right then and there in the meeting. I always assumed that Bob just went along with Simone because I was one of Simone's girls. You know, and I can tell you now, I called Bob Dad, and Simone is my mom. He gave me the most precious gift that night, and it was the best gift I've ever received. He was a man of few words, and you never knew quite where you stood with him. But when he finally did let you know, it hit you right here. I love that man dearly, and he was the best father I could have. My kids also loved him as a grandfather, too, and we really felt like we hit the jackpot when that family adopted us. I would like to close with a favorite quote of Dad's. He had many little sayings, but this one is so apropos. He would say, "Remember the 3 B's. Be brief, be honest, be seated." But after I wrote that, I realized that I was going to miss something today that man always gave to me right after I would share somewhere. It didn't matter if I bombed horribly, and one time I did, and he still said it. One time I did okay, and he still said it. But he would come up to me right after any time I shared, and I can just picture him saying it to me today. He would say, "You did good, kid." Until we meet again, Dad. Thank you.
And now Jennifer's going to play the clarinet. And I apologize, that's Jennifer, Bob's daughter-in-law. Simone would like to say a few words to all of you.
Well, more's come in since I sat down. I think all of you can see how proud Bob and I were of our family, and he made them what they are today. Jennifer, last time she played was her father's funeral a year ago, and she wanted to participate. Didn't think she could talk up here, and I think it took a lot more courage. But thank you, sweetheart. I'd like to thank Bob Ernst and John Emmons, our two vets who are members of the Patriot Guard and are standing in honor of Bob today. They actually called and asked to participate, as Bob being a veteran and a Purple Heart. And I want to thank you. It would mean so much to him. I also want to express my gratitude to the United States Military Honor Guard, who will be honoring Bob today. Bob's service in the U.S. Army is something our family is very proud of. I also want to thank all of you who helped Sharon Keating by volunteering with the food and anything else she needed to make this a special day. Sharon, where are you, Sharon? There you are, by the door. She's so afraid I'm going to talk too long. Sharon, the time and work you have put into helping us honor Bob can never be repaid. It is truly a gift from the heart. And we love you. Thank you. For the rest of you, I can't express how it makes us feel, the family, that you would take a time out of Saturday to share your love with Bob and to be here. I know my family, boys, what are you going to do, Mom? What are you going to do now, Mom? Dad's gone. They get to see the family. They get to know that I'm going to be okay. And I appreciate so much of you being here today and your support and your love. And I know that I'm going to try to be able to ask for the help I need. Towards the end of Bob's, I spent a year taking care of him, and as many of you know, we'd go to 4 meetings a week, but he slowly failing and wasn't eating too much, and I would do some stupid things, and I'd say, I was so dumb today, honey, I was so dumb, and kind of rationalize what I did or why I did it. And towards the end, he got so upset with me, he'd say, I don't ever want you to hear you say you are dumb. I would be kidding, but he would take it seriously. He didn't want me to. But, he was a man that taught me that I needed to love myself before I could feel anybody's love and before I could give love. And through this marriage, I learned how to love myself. And I had no idea that I could be loved by a human being as he loved me. But I also had no idea that I was capable of loving somebody as I did him. I got many emails a day of my girls reminding me that this is about Bob. Not about me, and I was to hold it in. But thank you. Thank you for being here for all of us. I love you, honey. He hasn't gone from me. His presence is here, and I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning this morning, and I could feel his presence, and I thought, he's going to be in that room, and I'm going to see the silent tear running down his cheek that he would have often. But thank you.
If you're able and willing, please stand for military honors. take your seats.
Before we close, I'd like to invite all of you to join the family in a brief reception in the Family Life Center. That's the building next door. And also want to request that after the prayer, everyone please remain at their seats so that the family can leave the church first. And please stand at your seats and hold hands as we recite the Serenity.